Picture this. Two people, same age, same city, same starting salary right out of college. 23 years old, making $48,000 a year. They grab coffee sometimes. They complain about rent. They both feel broke. One of them is actually building something. The other one just thinks they are. By the time they hit 30, the gap between their financial lives will be almost impossible to close. Not because one of them got lucky, not because one of them worked harder, but because one of them understood a few specific things at the right moment in time, and the other one learned those same things about 5 years too late. 5 years. That's the margin. That's how thin the window is. And the brutal irony is this. Your 20s feel like the worst possible time to think about money. You're underpaid, you're probably carrying debt, everything costs more than it should. The stock market looks either terrifying or fake depending on the week, and every financial influencer on the internet is either selling you a course or pretending they bought Bitcoin at $800. So most people in their 20s do one of two things. They ignore the whole thing entirely, or they engage with it superficially. They download the budgeting app, they open the investing account, they feel good about themselves for 48 hours, and then forget it exists. This video is not going to tell you to skip your morning coffee or manifest abundance. What it's going to do is walk you through the actual milestones, the ones that matter mechanically, mathematically, and structurally, in the order they should happen and why. Some of them will feel boring. Some of them will feel obvious, but the reason most people don't hit them isn't because they're complicated. It's because nobody ever explained what's actually at stake if you miss them. So let's start at the beginning. The first milestone, and the one people consistently underestimate, is building what's usually called an emergency fund. But that phrase has been so overused that it's almost lost its meaning. People hear it and think, oh right, savings. Yes, I should do that. And then they don't. So let me reframe it. An emergency fund is not a safety net, it's a negotiating position. Here's what I mean. When you have no liquid savings, every unexpected expense is a crisis. Your car breaks down, you go into debt. You lose your job, you panic and take the first offer you get because you have no runway. You have a medical bill, you put it on a credit card at 23% interest and spend the next year quietly digging out of a hole nobody can see. But when you have 3 to 6 months of expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account, not the savings account your bank gave you automatically that pays 0.01% interest, but an actual high-yield account currently paying somewhere between 4 and 5%, something changes. You start making decisions from a position of choice instead of fear. That shift is worth more than almost any investment return you could name. The target for most people in their 20s is somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000, depending on where you live and what your monthly expenses look like. And yes, that sounds like a lot, but the strategy isn't to save it all at once. The strategy is to automate a fixed amount, even if it's just $150 a month, into a separate account you don't look at and let time do the work while you focus on everything else. Get this done first, before you invest a single dollar in the stock market, before you pay extra on your student loans, before anything else. Because here's the uncomfortable math. One unexpected expense without a cushion can set you back 12 to 18 months financially. The emergency fund doesn't make you rich, it keeps you from getting poor twice. The second milestone is understanding your credit score, not obsessing over it, but actually understanding what it is and how it works, because most people have it backwards. Your credit score is not a measure of how responsible you are, it's a measure of how profitable you are to lenders. Those are not the same thing. The system rewards people who borrow money and pay it back on time. It does not reward people who live within their means, pay cash for everything, and never touch debt. In fact, if you've never had a credit card and you've never had a loan, your credit score might be genuinely terrible, even if you've never missed a bill in your life. This matters because your credit score follows you into almost every major financial decision of your 20s and beyond. Apartment applications, car loans, eventually mortgage rates. Some employers pull credit reports. Insurance companies in some states use credit scores to set premiums. It is woven into the infrastructure of your financial life, whether you like it or not. So the milestone here is simple but specific. Get one credit card, ideally one with no annual fee and either cash back or travel points. Use it for regular purchases you would make anyway. Pay the full balance every single month without any exception, and keep your utilization below 30% of your limit. That's it. That's the whole game. Do that consistently for 2 to 3 years, and you'll have a credit score that opens doors instead of closing them. The people who ignore this in their 20s and then try to buy a house at 32 with a thin credit file pay for it in interest rates. The difference between a good credit score and a mediocre one on a 30-year mortgage can be $80,000 to $100,000 over the life of the loan, not a rounding error. The third milestone is the one with the most dramatic math behind it and the one people blow off the most consistently: retirement contributions. I know, you're in your 20s. Retirement feels like a word that belongs to a different species of human. But this is where I need you to stay with me for a moment, because the numbers here are genuinely difficult to believe until you see them clearly. Compound interest is not a buzzword. It is one of the most powerful and patient forces in personal finance, and it operates entirely based on time, not income, not investment knowledge, time. Here's a real comparison. Person A starts contributing to a retirement account at 22. They put in $200 a month. They do this for 8 years until they're 30, and then they stop completely, never add another dollar. Person B waits until they're 30 to start. They put in $200 every month without stopping until they're 65. Assuming the same average market return of roughly 7% annually, which is conservative by historical standards, person A, who stopped contributing at 30, ends up with more money at retirement than person B, who contributed for 35 consecutive years. Read that again. The person who stopped at 30 beats the person who contributed until 65, simply because they started 8 years earlier. That is the power of compound interest, and it is not theoretical, it is arithmetic. The money makes money, and that money makes money, and the longer it has to do that, the more absurd the result becomes. The specific milestone here is this: if your employer offers any kind of 401k match, contribute at least enough to capture the full match. This is free money, not metaphorically free, literally free. A 50 or 100% match on your contribution is an instant 50 to 100% return before your money has done anything in the market. If there's no employer match, open a Roth IRA. In 2024, the contribution limit is $7,000 a year. You can contribute up to that amount from earned income. It grows tax-free, and you pay no taxes when you withdraw it in retirement. For someone in their 20s who is likely in a lower tax bracket now than they will be later, this is one of the most asymmetric advantages available in the entire tax code. The milestone is not to max it out immediately. The milestone is to start this month with whatever you can. $100, $50, because every month you delay is a month of compounding you cannot buy back at any price. The fourth milestone shifts the tone slightly, and it's one that doesn't come with a ticker or a chart, but it might be the one that shapes your financial life the most. It's developing an actual income strategy, not a side hustle, not passive income, an income strategy. Here's the thing about your 20s that nobody presents correctly. This is the decade with the highest return on investment for skill building. Not the stock market, not real estate, you. The difference between someone who earns $50,000 at 25 and someone who earns $90,000 at 25 is rarely talent. It's usually positioning, negotiation, and accumulated leverage. And those things can be learned. They're learnable skills, not personality traits. The milestone here has 3 components. First, learn to negotiate your salary. Studies consistently show that people who negotiate starting salaries earn anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 more per year from day one, and that gap compounds over every future raise, bonus, and job change for the rest of their career. Most people don't negotiate because it feels uncomfortable. The companies are counting on that. Second, develop at least one skill that is specific, demonstrable, and hard to automate. The labor market is shifting faster than it ever has. Generalist knowledge is becoming less valuable. The people who are insulated from that trend are the ones who can do something specific extremely well, and who can prove it. Third, if you have the capacity, build a secondary income stream. not to replace your job, just to reduce your dependence on a single source of income. Freelance work, consulting, a small digital product, content creation. The form matters less than the principle, because when your only income source is one employer, you have exactly zero negotiating power in a downturn. None of this happens overnight, but in your 20s, the cost of experimentation is low. You can try things, fail at them, and recover quickly. That gets harder at 35 when you have a mortgage and dependents at a lifestyle that's adjusted upward to match your current income. The fifth milestone is about debt, specifically how to think about it rather than just feel guilty about it. Student loans are the defining financial reality of an entire generation. The average borrower in the United States graduates with somewhere around $37,000 in federal student loan debt. Some carry far more, and the emotional weight of that number is real. It shapes decisions. It creates anxiety. It makes people feel like they're starting the race already behind. But here's where the strategy matters more than the emotion. Not all debt is the same urgency. Federal student loans at a 4 to 7% interest rate are not the same as credit card debt at 22%. High interest debt, anything above 7 or 8%, should be aggressively eliminated before investing beyond your employer match. The return on paying off a credit card with 22% interest is a guaranteed 22%. You cannot reliably beat that in the market. Lower interest debt is a genuine question of math and psychology. Mathematically, if your loan interest rate is 5% and your investment portfolio returns 7% on average, you come out slightly ahead by investing rather than aggressively paying down the loan. But mathematics doesn't account for the psychological freedom that comes from being debt-free, and that has value too. The milestone is not to have all debt eliminated by 30. That's often unrealistic. The milestone is to have a clear, conscious strategy, to know exactly what you owe, to whom, at what interest rate, and to have made a deliberate decision about the order in which you're tackling it. Most people don't have that. They make minimum payments and feel vaguely anxious. That's not a strategy. That's just delay with interest. The sixth milestone is the one that separates the people who accidentally build wealth from the people who consciously build it. Net worth tracking. Your net worth is a single number, everything you own minus everything you owe. It is the only number in personal finance that actually tells you where you stand. Not your salary, not your savings rate, not your investment portfolio balance, your net worth. And the reason most people never calculate it is that they're afraid of what they'll find. In your 20s, the number will often be negative, especially if you have student loans or car debt. A negative net worth at 24 is not a failure. It's a starting point, but a starting point that you can't improve if you never look at it. The milestone here is to calculate your net worth right now, today, and then recalculate it every 6 months. Not every day, that's how you torture yourself with market volatility, but twice a year, consistently, to see the trend line. Because here's what happens when you track it. The number becomes real. The decisions you make start to feel connected to something. You stop thinking in terms of monthly cash flow and start thinking in terms of actual wealth accumulation. And that shift in thinking changes behavior in ways that are subtle but compounding. There are free tools to do this. A spreadsheet works fine. The sophistication of the tool is irrelevant. The habit is everything. Now here's where the stakes escalate, because we've talked about the mechanics, the emergency fund, the credit, the retirement accounts, the income strategy, the debt, the net worth. All of that is real, and all of it matters. But there's a meta level that most financial content never reaches, and it might be the most important thing in this entire video. Your 20s are the decade when your financial identity forms, the habits you build, the defaults you set, the tolerances you develop. Those become the operating system that runs in the background for the rest of your adult life. The person who learns to live below their means at 23 will do it at 35 almost automatically. The person who normalizes lifestyle inflation, the steady expansion of spending to match or exceed income growth, will do it at 45. The person who defaults to avoidance when finances feel overwhelming will still be defaulting to avoidance 20 years later when the stakes are much, much higher. This is the uncomfortable truth underneath all the milestones. The milestones are not really about the money. They're about who you're becoming in relationship to money, whether you're becoming someone who engages, who makes conscious decisions, who builds systems and then lets those systems work quietly in the background, or whether you're becoming someone who reacts, who delays, who makes financial decisions primarily based on what's most emotionally comfortable in the moment. That identity, once formed, is hard to change. Not impossible, but hard. So here's where I'll leave you. Every major financial analysis of generational wealth, every longitudinal study of how people build or fail to build financial security points to the same uncomfortable finding. The single biggest predictor of financial outcomes at 40 and 50 is not income level in your 30s. It's not inheritance. It's not market timing. It's whether someone developed consistent financial behavior in their 20s. Behavior, not knowledge, not circumstances, behavior. Which means that the version of you that's watching this video right now, slightly underpaid, carrying some debt, feeling like the system is rigged and the math is against you and the window might already be closing, that version of you is actually at the most consequential inflection point of your entire financial life. Not because it gets easier later, it doesn't, but because the habits you start today are the ones that compound, just like the money does. And the question worth sitting with, the one that doesn't have a clean answer, is this. 10 years from now, when you're standing in the exact same relationship to money that you've been training yourself to have since your mid-20s, will you be glad you started building that relationship right now? Or will you be wishing you'd watched this video a little sooner?